Hey there, listeners. This is Richard Radio, coming to you through the static and the dark. If you're hearing my voice, you're still with us, still holding on in a world that's turned upside down. Welcome to the Midnight Signal, your beacon. In these strange times, it's been 3 weeks since they came. 3 weeks since the skies lit up with lights that weren't stars. Since those massive ships appeared over cities and fields, silent at first, then deafening. They didn't send a warning, didn't ask for a meeting. They just arrived. And in those first days, everything we thought we knew, our routines, our plans, our safety crumbled like dry leaves. I'm not here to dwell on what we've lost. You know it as well as I do. Instead, I'm here to talk about what's left. Us, the people still fighting, still hoping, still finding ways to keep going. This broadcast isn't just a voice in the dark. It's a lifeline, a way to share stories from folks like you, people who've faced the impossible and kept moving forward. Over the next hour, I'll tell you about some of those survivors, ordinary people, doing extraordinary things. I'll also share what we're learning about the invaders, the patterns we're starting to see, and some practical ways to stay safe out there. But most of all, I'm here to remind you that we're in this together. No matter how heavy the night feels, there's a spark of hope in every one of us, and together we can keep it burning. Let's start with a story from a small town called Cedar Hollow, tucked away in the hills of what used to be northern Oregon. Cedar Hollow was never much to look at, just a few streets, a diner, a hardware store, and fields stretching out toward the horizon. But when the invasion hit, the folks there didn't scatter or give up. They banded together, and their story is one worth hearing. It began on the second day, when the ships passed over. Most of Cedar Hollow's 300 residents had already seen the news: cities burning, highways jammed, power grids failing. The town's mayor, Clara Dunn, was a practical woman, a former schoolteacher who'd lived in Cedar Hollow her whole life. When the first ship appeared above the valley, its shadow stretching across the fields, Clara didn't wait for help. That wasn't coming. She called everyone to the community center, a brick building with a leaky roof but strong walls. By nightfall, they had a plan. Clara split the town into teams. Some folks, like Javier Torres, a mechanic, worked on fortifying the center, boarding up windows and rigging generators to keep the lights on. Others, like Aisha Khan, a nurse, set up a makeshift clinic in the basement, stocking it with whatever supplies they could scavenge from the pharmacy. A few volunteers, led by a farmer named Tom Weller, took on the risky job of scouting the edges of town, watching for signs of the invaders. By the third day, Cedar Hollow had its first real test. Tom's scouting team spotted movement in the field's small, darting shapes that weren't human. They were drones about the size of dogs, with sleek metallic bodies and glowing sensors. They moved in pairs, scanning the ground, and they were heading straight for the town. Tom radioed back, his voice steady but tight. Clara didn't hesitate. She ordered everyone to the community center, told them to stay quiet, and had Javier kill the generators. The town went dark. For hours, they waited, crammed into the basement, listening to the faint hum of the drones outside. Kids clung to their parents, and even the toughest folks like Javier, who'd seen plenty in his years, held their breath. Aisha moved through the crowd, checking on people, whispering to keep them calm. And Clara? She stood by the door, a flashlight in one hand, ready to lead if the worst happened. The drones circled for what felt like forever, their sensors sweeping the empty streets. Then, just as suddenly as they'd come, they left, their hum fading into the distance. When Tom's team checked the town at dawn, They found no trace of the drones, just a few scorch marks on the pavement where their sensors had burned too bright. Cedar Hollow had survived, not by fighting, but by being smart, staying quiet, and trusting each other. Clara's leadership didn't stop there. She knew the drones would be back, so she organized a system. They'd keep the town dark at night, use minimal power, and move supplies to hidden caches in the woods. Tom's scouts learned the drones' patterns when they patrolled, where they lingered and shared the info with nearby towns through a jury-rigged radio network. Aisha trained a few volunteers to handle basic medical care, so the clinic could keep running even if she was needed elsewhere. Cedar Hollow wasn't just surviving. It was adapting, finding ways to live in a world that had changed overnight. What I love about this story is how it shows what we're capable of when we work together. Clara, Javier, Aisha, Tom, they're not heroes from a movie. They're people like you and me, doing what needs to be done. They remind us that survival isn't just about hiding or running. It's about building something, even if it's small, even if it's just a plan to get through the next day. Let's move to another story. This one from a place called Marsh Point, a coastal village on the edge of what used to be Maine. Marsh Point is a different kind of place windswept, isolated, with salt in the air and waves that never stop crashing. When the invasion came, the village lost contact with the mainland. Phones went dead, internet vanished, and the only road out was blocked by a crashed ship, its wreckage smoldering for days. The 150 people in Marsh Point were on their own. At the heart of their survival was a man named Elias Reed, a fisherman who'd spent his life on the water. Elias was in his 60s, with a weathered face and a quiet way of speaking that made people listen. When the ships appeared, Elias didn't panic. He gathered the village at the dock, where his boat, the Blue Tern, was tied up. He told them the truth. Help wasn't coming, and they needed to rely on what they had: the sea, the land, and each other. Elias had a plan, born from years of reading the tides. The invaders' ships were mostly inland, targeting cities and bases, but their drones patrolled the coast, especially at night. Elias figured the village could use the sea to stay hidden. He organized the able-bodied to move supplies, food, blankets, tools to a series of caves along the shore, accessible only by boat at low tide. The caves were cold and damp, but they were safe, hidden from the drone sensors by the cliffs. Above .by the end of the first week, Marsh Point had a rhythm. Elias and a few other fishermen took turns running the Blue Tern out to sea, catching fish to feed the village. On shore, a woman named Nora Bell, who'd run the local library, kept track of supplies and rationed them carefully. Kids helped by collecting seaweed and shellfish, while older folks like Mabel Chen, a retired gardener, started planting hardy crops in sheltered patches of soil. Everyone had a job, and everyone mattered. Their biggest challenge came on the 10th day. A storm rolled in, one of the worst Elias had ever seen, with waves that battered the caves and winds that tore at the boats. The Blue Tern was damaged, its engine flooded, and the village lost half their food stores when a cave flooded. For a moment, it looked like Marsh Point might break, but Elias didn't let it. He called everyone together, even as the storm raged, and reminded them that they'd faced storms before, not alien ones, maybe, but storms all the same. They could rebuild. Nora and Mabel took charge on land, organizing teams to salvage what they could from the flooded cave. Elias worked with a young mechanic, Samir Patel, to fix the Blue Tern's engine using parts scavenged from an old truck. By the time the storm passed, Marsh Point was battered but standing. They'd lost a lot, but they'd gained something too, a sense that they could face anything. As long as they didn't give up, Elias's story sticks with me because it's about using what you know. He didn't try to fight the invaders or outrun them. He used the sea, the caves, the tides, things he'd learned over a lifetime, and he shared that knowledge, trusted others to step up. That's what survival looks like now, leaning on what you've got and leaning on each other. Before I move on, let's talk about what we're learning about the invaders. I don't have all the answers, nobody does, but we're piecing things together, bit by bit, from reports coming in over the radio. The ships, the ones that first appeared, seem to be hubs, like floating command centers. They're massive, some as big as a small town, and they don't move much once they settle over a place. Smaller craft, drones, shuttles, whatever you want to call them, come and go, patrolling or scouting. The drones we've seen, like the ones in Cedar Hollow, are fast and precise, designed to scan and report. They don't attack unless provoked, but they're always watching, then there are the ground units. We don't know much, but we've heard stories from survivors in places like the Great Plains and the Southwest. These units aren't machines, not exactly. They're something else. Tall, thin, with limbs that bend in ways that don't make sense. They move in groups, silent, and they're fast. Some folks call them stalkers because they seem to hunt, tracking people who move too openly. We don't know what they want: resources, territory, or something we can't even guess at, but they're out there, and they're dangerous. What's clear is that the invaders aren't random. They have a plan, even if we can't see it yet. They target power plants, communication towers, anything that keeps us connected. They avoid water, at least for now, which is why places like Marsh Point have a chance. And they're learning, adapting, just like we are. That's what makes them scary, but it's also why we need to keep sharing what we know. So, how do you stay safe out there? I'm no expert, but I've been listening to survivors, and here's what they're doing. First, stay hidden. The drones are everywhere, and they're looking for movement, light, heat. If you're in a house, cover the windows with blankets or boards. If you're outside, stick to shadows. Move at dawn or dusk when the light's low. Second, keep quiet. Sound carries, and the drones pick it up. Walk softly, don't shout, and if you're with others, use hand signals when you can. Food and water are tough. If you're in a city, stores are probably empty or too risky. Look for smaller places, gas stations, vending machines, even abandoned cars. In the country, rivers and streams are your best bet for water, but boil it if you can. A fire's risky, so use it sparingly and never at night. For food, learn what's edible around you. Berries, roots, even insects can keep you going if you know what to look for. Last, don't lose hope. I know it's hard. You're tired, scared, maybe alone. But every day you're still here is a day you've won. Find something to hold on to, a memory, a goal, a person you're fighting for. It doesn't have to be big. Sometimes it's just the thought of seeing the sun rise again. One of the old steel mills, a sprawling maze of rusted pipes and concrete walls. Her plan was simple but bold. Turn the mill into a safe haven, a place the drones couldn't easily reach. The mills had thick walls, underground tunnels, and enough scrap metal to build defenses. Lena's group included all sorts: factory workers, teachers, even a couple of teenagers who knew their way around tech. They got to work fast. The first challenge was the drones. They patrolled Iron Bend every few hours, their hum echoing through the empty streets. Lena noticed they avoided the mill's interior, maybe because the metal interfered with their sensors. She had her team seal off the main entrances, using heavy steel plates welded in place. They left only one way in and out a narrow tunnel that led to a drainage ditch outside town. It was a tight squeeze, but it kept them hidden. Inside, they set up camp. A man named Marcus Tate, who'd been a science teacher, rigged a ventilation system using old fans and ductwork to keep the air fresh. Two sisters, Riley and Kaylee Dunn, both in their teens, figured out how to tap into a nearby water main, giving the group a steady supply. Food was trickier, but Lena organized scavenging runs to abandoned shops on the edge of town. Always at night, always quiet. They brought back canned goods, dried beans, anything that would last. Be why the second week, Iron Ben's mill was a small community. They had sleeping areas, a kitchen of sorts, and even a corner where kids could draw or play quietly. But what really set them apart was their defense system. Lena and Marcus came up with a way to trick the drones. They'd noticed the drones were drawn to heat and movement, so they built decoys, piles of scrap metal heated with small fires, set up a few 100 yards from the mill. When drones got close, they'd light the decoys, drawing the machines away. It wasn't foolproof, but it bought them time. Their biggest test came on a cold, foggy night. A group of drones more than they'd ever seen swarmed the town, their sensors cutting through the mist. Riley, who was on lookout, spotted them early and raised the alarm. Lena ordered everyone to the deepest part of the mill, a storage room 3 levels underground. They doused the lights, killed the fans, and waited. The drones circled for hours, closer than ever before, their hum vibrating through the walls. At one point, Marcus whispered that he thought they'd found the tunnel entrance, but the decoys worked. The drones zeroed in on the burning scrap piles, scanning them instead of the mill. By dawn, they were gone, leaving only a few scorch marks on the ground. Lena's group didn't celebrate, they were too tired for that, but they felt a quiet pride. They'd outsmarted the invaders, at least for now. What I take from Iron Ben is how they turned a place most would overlook into a stronghold. Lena didn't have a manual for this. She just used what she knew welding, the layout of the mill, and trusted her people to fill in the gaps. It's a reminder that survival isn't always about running or fighting. Sometimes it's about digging in, using what's around you, and being clever. Let's shift to another story. This one from a place called Willow Creek, a small farming community in what used to be central Nebraska. Willow Creek is flat, open country, the kind of place where you can see for miles. That openness was a problem when the invasion started. There was nowhere to hide from the ships or the drones that followed. But the people of Willow Creek found a way, and their story is about resilience, about holding on to what matters even when the world's falling apart. The heart of Willow Creek's survival was a woman named Sarah Holt, a third-generation farmer who knew the land like her own heartbeat. When the ships appeared, Sarah didn't wait for the town's 200 residents to panic. She called a meeting at her barn, a big red building that had weathered decades of storms. Her message was clear. They couldn't stay in their homes, out in the open. They needed to move, and they needed to do it together. Sarah's plan was to go underground. Willow Creek had a network of old irrigation tunnels, built years ago to channel water from the creek. The tunnels weren't meant for people. They were narrow, damp, and pitch black, but they were hidden, running beneath the fields. Sarah figured they could be a temporary refuge. She led the town in packing up essentials, food, blankets, lanterns. By the next day, most of Willow Creek was living underground, their homes left empty above. Life in the tunnels wasn't easy. The air was thick, the walls dripped, and there was no room to move freely. Sarah kept everyone focused. She assigned tasks. A man named Eli Parker, a carpenter, reinforced the tunnel entrances with wooden beams. A retired cook, Gloria Mendez, organized meals, stretching their supplies with careful rations. And a young man, Devin Cole, who'd been studying engineering, rigged battery-powered lights to keep the darkness at bay. The real danger was the drones. They swept the fields daily, their sensors searching for signs of life. Sarah's group learned to move only at night, sending small teams to the surface to gather crops from the fields or check on the town. They covered their tracks, smoothing out footprints and hiding their tunnel entrances with dirt and grass. It was slow, careful work, but it kept them alive. One night, they faced a close call. Devin was leading a scavenging team when they heard the drones, 3 of them, closer than usual. The team froze, crouching in a ditch, but one of the younger kids, scared, dropped a metal canteen. It clattered against a rock, loud in the quiet. The drones turned, their sensors locking onto the sound. Devin didn't hesitate. He grabbed a handful of stones and threw them hard in the opposite direction, toward a dry creek bed. The drones followed the noise, giving the team just enough time to slip back to the tunnels. When they got back, Sarah didn't scold the kid who dropped the canteen. Instead, she sat everyone down and talked about staying calm, about how mistakes happen, but they could learn from them. That moment stuck with the group. It wasn't just about surviving the drones, it was about keeping their humanity, looking out for each other, even when things went wrong. Willow Creek's story shows what it means to adapt to a place that's no longer safe. Sarah didn't try to fight the invaders or run to some far-off city. She used the land she knew, the tunnels under her fields, and built a life there, however hard it was. It's a lesson for all of us. Sometimes survival means finding a way. To stay where you are, to make the impossible work. Now, let's talk a bit more about the invaders, because knowing what we're up against is half the battle. We're getting more reports over the radio, pieced together from survivors across the country. The ships, those massive hulks in the sky, seem to be anchors for the invasion. They don't move much, but they're always active, sending out drones, or smaller craft. Some folks think they're processing something, maybe resources, maybe data, but we don't know for sure. What we do know is they're methodical, like they're following a blueprint. We can't see. The drones are the eyes and ears. They're fast, precise, and relentless, scanning for anything that moves or gives off heat. But they have limits. They struggle in dense areas, forests, cities with tall buildings, places like Iron Ben's Mill. That's why groups like Lena's are using cover to their advantage. The ground units, the ones some call stalkers, are another story. We're hearing more about them now, especially from survivors in open areas like the plains. They're tall, maybe 8 or 9 feet, with long, flexible limbs and a way of moving that's too smooth, too quiet. They don't seem to use weapons, but they don't need to. They're strong, fast, and they hunt in packs. One report from a survivor in Kansas described a stalker chasing a group through a cornfield. The group scattered, but the stalker didn't pick them off one by one. It waited, watched, like it was studying them. That's what's unsettling. These things aren't just attacking. They're learning, maybe even thinking. It's why we need to stay one step ahead, to keep sharing what we see and hear. So, what can you do to stay safe? I've been listening to survivors, and they're finding ways to tip the scales. First, think about your surroundings. If you're in a city, use the clutter alleys, basements, wrecked cars. Drones have a harder time tracking you there. In the country, stick to natural cover, like trees or hills. If you're moving, do it. when the drones are least active, usually just before dawn or after dusk. Watch for their patterns like Lena's group did. Second, conserve what you have. Water's critical, so find a source of stream. A well, even rainwater, if you can collect it. Boil it or filter it through cloth if you're not sure it's clean. Food's harder, but don't overlook what's around you. In urban areas, check. Places others might miss, like office break rooms or school cafeterias. In rural spots, learn what's edible. Cattails, clover, even dandelion leaves can keep you going, but only eat what you're sure of. Third, stay connected, even if it's just in your head. If you're alone, talk to yourself, sing a song, remember a story. It sounds small, but it keeps you grounded. If you're with others, share the load, take turns keeping watch, scavenging, or just talking about something normal, like a movie you loved or a meal you miss. Those moments remind you what you're fighting for. Before I wrap up this part, I want to share one more quick story, because it's a good one. It's about a kid named Jamal Carter, a 14-year-old from a suburb outside what used to be Atlanta. Jamal was on his own when the invasion hit, separated from his family in the chaos. He ended up in a strip mall, hiding in the back of a hardware store. Most people would have stayed put, but Jamal got creative. He'd always been good with gadgets. The kind of kid who could fix a broken radio or build a go-kart from scrap. In the store, he found tools, batteries, and rolls of wire. He started experimenting, building small traps to keep drones away. His best one was a noisemaker, a battery-powered fan with bits of metal tied to it, set up to rattle when he flipped a switch. He'd place it far from his hiding spot, turn it on, and watch the drones swarm to the sound while he slipped away. Jamal's still out there, moving from place to place, using his traps to stay one step ahead. He's even started leaving notes for other survivors, scribbled on bits of cardboard. Drones hate noise. Make some. It's a small thing, but it's spreading. Other folks are copying his idea, using whatever they can find to distract the drones. Jamal's story is proof that you don't need to be big or strong to make a difference. You just need to be smart, and maybe a little stubborn. There's a chill in the air tonight, isn't there? Maybe it's just the way the world feels now. Like it's holding its breath. I want to start with a story from a place called Redstone, a mining town in what used to be eastern Kentucky. Redstone's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, built around deep coal mines that crisscross under the hills. When the invasion came, those mines became more than just a livelihood, they became a lifeline. And at the center of it all was a man named Owen Fisk, a mine foreman with a knack for keeping people steady under pressure. Redstone had about 400 folks when the ships showed up. Like everywhere else, they watched the news until it went dark, saw the drones sweep through the valley, their lights cutting through the night. Owen didn't waste time. He knew the mine's miles of tunnels, some abandoned, some still active, could hide them. He called a town meeting in the local church and laid it out. The surface wasn't safe, but underground, they had a chance. Most agreed, and by the next morning, they were moving. Owen led the way, guiding families into the deepest tunnels, ones too far down for drones to scan. He'd spent 20 years in those mines, so he knew which passages were stable, which had air. Shafts, and where the old emergency caches were water, lanterns, even some canned food from decades ago. A woman named Tara Wells, who ran the town's only diner, took charge of organizing supplies, making sure everyone had enough to eat. A retired electrician, Calvin Morse, got to work rigging lights and a small generator, running it only when they were sure the drones were far off. Life underground was tough. The air was heavy, the darkness constant, and the kids especially struggled with the cramped space. But Owen kept everyone focused. He set up a schedule, teams to check the air, shafts, others to scavenge on the surface at night, and a few, like Tara, to keep spirits up with stories or songs. They even started a school of sorts, with a teacher named Leela Hayes using chalk on the tunnel walls to teach kids math and reading. Their biggest scare came about 2 weeks in. Calvin was checking an air shaft when he heard a new sound nut. The usual drone hum, but something heavier like footsteps. He signaled Owen, who cleared the main tunnel, and sent a scout, a young miner named Diego Ruiz, to check it out. Diego crept toward the surface and saw them, stalkers, 3 of them, moving through the woods near the mine entrance. They weren't like the drones, all metal and precision. These were tall, with long, bending limbs and a strange, fluid way of moving like they didn't belong to this world. Owen didn't panic. He dealt with mine collapses and gas leaks. This was just a new kind of danger. He ordered everyone to the deepest chamber, a half-mile down, and had Diego block the tunnel entrance with loose rock, making it look like a cave-in. They turned off the lights, silenced the generator, and waited. For 2 days, they sat in the dark, barely speaking, listening for any sign the stalkers had found them. The kids clung to their parents, and even Owen, steady as he was, admitted later his hands were shaking. On the 3rd day, Diego checked the entrance. The stalkers were gone, leaving only a few strange marks in the dirt deep, uneven, like something heavy had dragged itself through. Redstone had dodged disaster, but Owen knew they couldn't stay. Lucky forever. He started training a small group, including Diego and Leela, to scout more carefully, to watch for stalker patterns. They learned the creatures moved mostly at twilight, sticking to open ground, and seemed to avoid tight spaces. Like the mine tunnels. That knowledge became their shield. Redstone's story is about trust in a leader like Owen, who knew his ground, and trust in each other to hold the line. They didn't have much, just those old mines and their grit, but they made it work. It's a reminder that sometimes the safest place is the one you know best, even if it's dark and cold. Now, let's head somewhere different, a city, or what's left of one. This story comes from New Haven, a port city that used to be part of Connecticut. New Haven was hit hard in the first days, its skyline torn apart by the ships, its streets choked with wreckage. But in the chaos, a group of survivors carved out a way to keep going, and their story is about moving, staying one step ahead of the invaders. The leader here was a woman named Amara Chen, a bus driver who knew New Haven's streets like the back of her hand. When the invasion started, Amara was driving her route, ferrying people out of the city center as panic spread. By the time the ships settled over the city, she'd gathered a group of about 50 passengers, co-workers, strangers, who'd followed her lead. They couldn't stay in the open, so Amara took them to an old parking garage, half collapsed but defensible. On the edge of town, Amara's group didn't plan to stay put. She knew the drones and stalkers were scouring the city, and a fixed spot was a death trap. Instead, she turned her bus into their lifeline. The vehicle was still running, and Amara used it to move her people from one hiding spot to another, warehouses, subway tunnels, even a boarded-up school. They'd stay a day or 2, then move again, always at night, always quiet. Amara drove, with the headlights off, navigating by memory, while a man named Felix Ortiz, a former security guard, rode shotgun, watching for drones. The group had a system. A nurse, Priya Sharma, handled injuries and kept a small stock of medical supplies, scavenged from pharmacies or abandoned clinics. Two brothers, Leo and Mateo Vargas, both in their 20s, took on the risky job of scouting ahead, slipping through alleys to check if the next spot was clear. Kids helped by keeping lookout or packing supplies, while older folks like Esther Klein, a retired librarian, told stories to keep everyone calm during the long, tense nights their closest call came. One night, in a subway tunnel, they'd parked the bus nearby and were hiding in the dark when Felix spotted a stalker, just one, but close, its silhouette moving along the tracks. The group froze, but a kid, nervous, coughed. The stalker stopped, its head turning toward. The sound. Amara didn't hesitate. She whispered to Felix, who grabbed a broken pipe and banged it against the tunnel wall, far from the group. The stalker lunged toward the noise, giving Amara time to lead everyone out a side exit to the bus. They drove off, hearts pounding, and didn't stop until they reached a new hiding spot miles away. Amara's group is still moving, still surviving. They've learned the city's rhythms when the drones patrol with the stalkers hunt. They leave signs for other survivors, chalk marks on walls, an arrow for a safe path, a circle for danger. Amara's not fighting a war. She's keeping her people alive, 1 mile at a time. Her story shows that survival can mean staying light, staying ready to go when the ground shifts under you. Let's talk more about the invaders, because every bit we learn helps. The ships are still the backbone of their operation, hovering over cities like New Haven or open land like Willow Creek's fields. They're not just sitting there. Survivors report smaller craft docking with them, maybe carrying supplies or data. Some think the ships are building something, but we don't know what. They're shielded too. A few groups tried attacking them early on, but nothing got through. The drones are everywhere, but we're noticing patterns. They stick to grids, sweeping areas methodically, and they're weaker in bad weather, rain, fog, anything that messes with their sensors. That's why groups like Iron Bend use decoys or wait for storms to move. The stalkers, though, are tougher. They're not just hunters. They're trackers, following trails for miles. A survivor from Texas said they seem drawn to groups, not individuals, like they're targeting communities. That's why splitting up, like Amara's group does, can sometimes throw them off. We're also hearing about new threats. In the Midwest, survivors have seen small, spider-like machines smaller than drones, maybe a foot wide, crawling through ruins. They don't attack, but they collect things. Metal, wires, even bones. Nobody knows what they're for, but they're fast and hard to catch. If you see one, don't engage. Just watch and report it if you can. .so. How do you keep going out there? First, stay unpredictable. If you're in one place too long, like Redstone's mines, you're a target. Move when you can. Vary your routine, and don't leave obvious tracks. If you're scavenging, hit different spots, not the same store twice. Second, protect your mind. Fear's a killer, and it's easy to spiral when you're alone or tired. Find a ritual, counting steps, humming a tune, anything to keep your head clear. If you're with others, talk, even if it's just about the weather. It keeps you human. Third, share what you know. If you've seen a stalker's pattern or found a safe water source, tell someone. Leave a note, like Jamal's, or pass it on by radio if you've got one. Every piece of info is a tool for someone else. And don't underestimate the small stuff. A survivor in Oregon said she stayed alive by eating wild mint and trapping squirrels. It's not glamorous, but it works. One last story before I close this part. It's about a woman named Ruth Nakamura, a park ranger from what used to be Montana. Ruth was alone when the invasion hit, out in the mountains, far from any town. She didn't have a group, just her gear and her knowledge of the land. When the drones started sweeping the forests, Ruth went deep into the wilderness. Living in caves and under tree cover, Ruth's survival is all about blending in. She wears dark clothes, covers her tracks, and moves only when the wind's strong enough to mask her steps. She's learned to read the drones' patterns, noticing they avoid steep slopes or dense brush. For food, she forages berries, mushrooms, edible bark, and sets snares for small animals. She's even started mapping safe routes through the mountains, scratching them into tree trunks for others to find. What's remarkable about Ruth is her calm. She's alone, but she's not lonely. She talks to the trees, she says, to keep her mind sharp. She's still out there, a ghost in the forest, proof that you can survive with nothing but your wits and the land. Her story's a quiet one, but it's powerful. It says you don't need a group or a fortress, just the will to keep moving. Forward, I want to start with a story from a place called Sagebrush, a desert outpost in what used to be Nevada. Sagebrush is a speck of a town, just a gas station, a few houses, and endless sand stretching out under the stars. When the invasion hit, the 150 or so folks there were cut off no roads, no signals, just the hum of drones in the distance. But they didn't give up. Their story is about using the land itself to survive, and it centers on a man named Hector Alvarez, a geologist who'd spent years mapping the desert. Hector knew Sagebrush sat on a maze of dry riverbeds and slot canyons, carved out long ago by water that was gone now. When the ships appeared, he saw those canyons as more than just scenery they were cover, a way to hide from the drones and stalkers. He rallied the town at the community hall, a cinder-block building with a sagging roof, and laid out his plan. Move into the canyons, where the narrow walls and overhangs would shield them from scans. Most folks trusted Hector's knowledge, and by the next day, they were packing up, hauling food, blankets, and tarps into the desert. Life in the canyons was harsh. The days were scorching, the nights freezing, and water was scarce. Hector showed them how to find seep's small pockets of groundwater trapped in the rock by looking for green patches or damp stone. A woman named Rosa Padilla, who'd run the gas station, organized the group into teams. Some dug shallow wells, others built shelters with tarps and branches, and a few, like a teenager named Casey Tran, scouted the canyon rims for signs of drones. They moved carefully, staying under rock ledges to avoid being seen from above. Hector's biggest worry was the stalkers. They'd been spotted in the open desert, their long limbs picking through the sand at dusk. He taught the group to erase their tracks, brushing away footprints with sagebrush branches, and to travel only when the wind was up, masking their movement. They also set up falls, trails, lines of rocks, or disturbed sand leading to dead end. Canyons to throw off any trackers. It was slow work, but it kept sagebrush hidden. Their toughest moment came one night when Casey, on scout duty, saw something new. A group of those spider-like machines we've heard about, skittering across the desert. There were dozens, each the size of a dinner plate, their legs clicking. As they moved, they weren't attacking, but they were scanning, collecting scraps of metal and plastic. Casey radioed back, and Hector made a quick call. Everyone pulled back to the deepest canyon, a narrow slot barely wide enough for two people to stand side by side. They covered their shelters with sand-colored tarps and went silent for hours. The machines crawled nearby, their clicks echoing off the canyon walls. Rosa kept the kids calm, telling them stories about the desert's history, while Hector and Casey watched from a high perch, tracking the machine's path. By morning, the spiders were gone, leaving only faint scratches in the sand. Sagebrush had stayed invisible, thanks to Hector's knowledge and the group's discipline. They didn't relax, though Hector started mapping new routes, deeper, into the canyons, in case the machines came back. What Sagebrush shows us is how the land can be your ally. Hector didn't fight the desert's harshness. He worked with it, using its hiding spots and tricks. It's a lesson for anyone out there. Look at what's around you, whether it's a forest, a city, or a stretch of sand, and find what it offers. That's how you carve out a chance to keep going. Let's move to a different kind of place, a suburb called Fairview, just outside what used to be Denver. Fairview was all cul-de-sacs and strip malls, a place where people mowed their lawns and waved to neighbors. When the invasion came, it turned into a ghost town, with drones patrolling the streets and stalkers lurking in the parks. But a small group of survivors found a way to hold on, and their story is about staying quiet, staying smart, and keeping hope alive. The group was led by a woman named Naomi Brooks, a librarian with a knack for organizing chaos. Naomi was at the Fairview Library when the ships arrived, helping people find news or charge their phones. As the city fell apart, she stayed, gathering about 30 people who had nowhere else to go, families, teenagers, a few elderly folks. The library became their base, not because it was strong, but because it was overlooked, tucked behind a grocery. Store and half hidden by trees, Naomi's strategy was simple: blend in. The library's windows were already boarded up from a recent storm, so they added more cover, using bookshelves to block sight lines. A man named Tyrone Ellis, a landscaper, helped camouflage the building, piling branches and dirt against the walls to make it look abandoned. Inside, they lived quietly, speaking in whispers, moving only when necessary. A teenager named Zoe Kim, who'd been a track star, took on the job of scouting, slipping out at night to check for drones or scavenge food from nearby houses. They had to be careful with supplies. A woman named Linda Hayes, a former chef, rationed their food, mostly canned goods and dry cereal, into small meals, making sure everyone got enough to stay strong. Water was tougher. The library's pipes were dry, so Tyrone rigged a system to catch rainwater in buckets hidden under the eaves. They stored it in plastic bins, treating it with bleach drops Zoe found in a janitor's closet. It wasn't perfect, but it kept them alive. Their biggest test came one evening when Zoe spotted a stalker just 2 blocks away. It was alone, moving through a playground, its long limbs bending as it scanned the ground. Naomi gathered everyone in the library's basement, a cramped space filled with old archives. They turned off their lanterns, covered the vents, and waited. The stalker came closer, its steps faint but steady, like a heartbeat in the dark. Linda held a little girl's hand, keeping her from crying, while Tyrone stood by the door, ready to block it if needed. The stalker lingered outside for what felt like hours, its shadow passing over the boarded windows. Then, just as suddenly, it moved on, disappearing into the night. When Zoe checked at dawn, she found no trace of it, just a few deep prints in the mud. Naomi didn't let the group dwell on the fear. She called a meeting, talked through what they'd done right, staying silent, staying hidden, and what they could do better, like reinforcing the basement door. It was a small victory, but it reminded them they could outlast the danger. Fairview's story is about discipline, about doing the small things right. Naomi didn't have a grand plan. She just kept her people focused, kept them quiet, kept them together. It's a reminder that survival isn't always about big moves. Sometimes it's about the patience to wait, the care to cover your tracks, and the strength to keep everyone on the same page. Now, let's dig a bit deeper into what we're learning about the invaders. The radio's been buzzing with new reports, and we're starting to see more of their strategy. The ships, those floating giants, aren't just command centers, they're changing the land around them. Survivors near big cities, like New Haven, have noticed strange growths near the ships, patches of dark metallic material spreading over the ground, like roots or veins. It's not natural, and it's not random. Some think it's a kind of terraforming, reshaping the earth for whatever the invaders need. Plants die where it spreads, and water sources dry up. If you're near one of these areas, move away fast. The drones are still the main threat for most of us. They're relentless, but they're not perfect. Survivors in the south have noticed they struggle in high humidity. Maybe it clogs their sensors. If you're in a wet area, use fog or rain to your advantage, but don't count on it. The stalkers are trickier. They're not just hunting now. They're guarding. Reports from the Great Lakes say stalkers are patrolling near the metallic growths, like they're protecting them. They're also getting bolder, moving into tighter spaces, like alleys or forests, where they used to avoid. Those spider-like machines are showing up more, too. A survivor in Arizona said they're not just collecting, they're building. She saw a group of them assembling something, a small structure maybe, all sharp angles and glowing joints. It was gone by morning, but it left her uneasy. If you spot these spiders, watch from a distance and note what they're taking. It might tell us what the invaders are after. So, how do you stay safe in this mess? First, keep moving, but smartly. Don't stay in one spot too long, like Naomi's group avoids. If you're in a city, use the maze of streets and buildings to confuse drones. In open country, travel along natural lines, rivers, ridges that offer cover. Second, hide your heat. Drones and stalkers can sense body heat, so wrap yourself in blankets or tarps when you rest, and avoid fires unless you're sure you're shielded. Third, build alliances, even small ones. If you're alone, like Ruth, that's fine, but if you can connect with others, do it. Share food, share info, share a watch shift. A survivor in Idaho said his group survived a stalker attack because they had 3 people on lookout, not 1. Numbers matter. And don't forget to rest. You can't run forever, so find moments to breathe, to eat, to remember why you're doing this. It's not just about staying alive, it's about living. One last story for this part, because it's a good one. It's about a man named Imran Said, a pharmacist from what used to be Chicago. Imran was working late when the invasion hit, and his pharmacy became a refuge for about a dozen people, customers, neighbors, a delivery driver named Carla. The city was a war zone, with drones everywhere, so Imran decided to make the pharmacy a temporary safe house. He boarded up the windows, moved everyone to the back room, and started rationing supplies, bandages, painkillers, even energy bars from the front counter. Carla, who knew the city's delivery routes, scouted for food and water, slipping through back alleys to avoid drones. Imran taught the group basic first aid, showing them how to clean wounds or spot infections, things that could save a life. Now, they even made a small radio, using parts from a broken security system, to listen for other survivors. Their biggest challenge was a drone that kept circling the block. It wasn't random, it was scanning, methodical, like it knew they were there. Imran came up with a plan. He and Carla collected empty pill bottles, filled them with nails, and rigged them to a battery-powered fan. When the drone got close, they turned on the fan, letting the bottles rattle loudly in an alley across the street. The drone followed the noise, giving them a window to reinforce their hiding spot with more boards and shelves. Imran's group is still there, holding out, sharing what they have. He's started leaving medical kits in hidden spots, bandages, antiseptic, instructions marked with a painted S for survivors. It's his way of helping, even if he can't see who finds them. Imran's story is about giving back, about using what you know to make a difference, no matter how small, them in makeshift shelters woven from branches, keeping the outlines blurred to avoid detection from above. Marla showed them how to move through the forest, stepping on roots or rocks to avoid leaving prints, and how to cover their tracks with pine needles. A woman named Sonia Patel, who'd run the town's grocery, took charge of food, rationing. Their supplies mostly canned goods and dried fruit, and teaching folks to forage for edible plants like fiddleheads and wild leeks. Their biggest challenge was the drones. The thick canopy helped, scattering the drone's sensors, but they still came close, their hum vibrating through the trees. Marla trained a few volunteers, including a teenager named Riley Voss, to act as lookouts, perched high in the pines with binoculars scavenged from a sporting goods store. Riley's sharp eyes caught the drone's patterns. They patrolled in loops, mostly at dawn and dusk, so the group timed their movements to avoid those hours. One night, they faced a real test. Riley spotted something new, a stalker, moving through the forest, its long limbs brushing against the trees. It wasn't alone. Two more followed, their steps silent but deliberate. Marla didn't hesitate. She signaled everyone to climb onto the platforms, pulling up ropes they'd rigged for escape. They doused their small fire, covered it with dirt, and went still. Dwayne, who'd seen plenty of wildlife in his years, whispered to the kids to breathe slowly. To keep their fear quiet, the stalkers moved through the clearing, their strange, bending bodies passing just below. One paused, its head tilting as if listening, and Sonia gripped Riley's hand to keep him from moving. For an hour they waited. The only sound was the wind in the pines. Then the stalkers left, slipping back into the dark. When Riley checked, at first light, he found faint marks where their limbs had scraped the bark, but no other trace. Marla gathered everyone after, not to dwell on the scare, but to plan. They added more platforms, higher up, and started practicing silent drills so they'd be ready if the stalkers returned. Pine Hollow's story is about leaning on the world around you. Marla didn't try to outrun the invaders or fight them. Head on. She used the forest, its cover, its quiet, to keep her people safe. It's a lesson for all of us. Whatever's around you, whether trees or buildings or desert, can be part of your survival if you know how to use it. Let's shift to another story, this one from a place called Bayview, a fishing town on what used to be the Gulf Coast of Alabama. Bayview's a salty, weathered place, with docks that creak and marshes that stretch out to the horizon. When the invasion hit, the town's 200 residents were cut off, their boats the only way out. Their story is about the water and its centers. On a man named Calvin Reed, a shrimper who'd spent his life reading the tides, Calvin was on his boat, the Gulf Star, when the ships appeared, their shadows darkening the water. He raced back to Bayview, where people were already boarding up homes or trying to drive inland. Calvin knew the roads where trap drones were already sweeping the highways, so he called everyone to the docks. His plan was to use the marshes, a maze of channels and reeds where drones struggled to navigate. About half the town followed, piling into boats or wading through shallow water. To reach hidden spots deep in the wetlands, they set up camp on a cluster of small islands, using reeds and tarps for cover. Calvin showed them how to tie their boats to mangrove roots, keeping them steady but hidden. A woman named Tanya Brooks, a former bartender, organized supplies, stretching their food mostly fish and canned vegetables with careful meals cooked over small, shielded fires. A retired mechanic, Javier Luna, kept the boats running, patching leaks and rigging sails when fuel ran low. Kids helped by collecting oysters and crabs, learning the marshes alongside their parents. The drones were their main threat, skimming low over the water, their sensors glinting in the sun. Calvin noticed they avoided the deepest channels, where the reeds were thickest, so he mapped safe routes, marking them with bits of cloth tied to branches. They moved camp every few days, staying one step ahead of the patrols. Javier also rigged. Noise traps old cans tied to ropes, set to clatter in the wind to draw drones away from their camps. Their closest call came one foggy morning. Tanya was out checking traps when she heard a new sound, a low, pulsing hum, different from the drones. She signaled Calvin, who recognized it from radio reports, a group of those spider-like machines crawling along the marsh's edge. They were scanning, picking up bits of metal and rope, maybe looking for the boats. Calvin ordered everyone to pull their tarps tight and sink low in the reeds. Javier cut the boat's engines, and they waited, the fog their only cover, the machines. Moved closer, their legs probing the water, but the fog confused them. After what felt like forever, they retreated, their hum fading into the mist. When Calvin checked later, he found a small pile of metal scraps where they'd been, like they'd been testing something. He didn't waste time wondering what. He moved the camp that night, deeper into the marshes. Bayview's still out there, living on the water, using the tides and fog to stay free. What Bayview teaches us is flexibility. Calvin didn't cling to the town or try to rebuild it. He took his people to where they had an edge, the marshes, and made it work. It's a reminder to stay open to change, to go where you can survive, even if it's not where you started. Now, let's talk more about the invaders, because every scrap of info helps. The ships are still the heart of their operation, but we're hearing new things. Survivors in the Northeast say the ships are emitting strange pulses, low, rhythmic, like a heartbeat. They're not sure what it means, but it's messing with radios and compasses nearby. If you're close to a ship, keep your distance. Those pulses might be more than just noise. Some think they're signaling, maybe to the smaller craft or even to something we haven't seen yet. The drones are adapting. Reports from the West Coast say they're moving in tighter formations now, like they're coordinating better. They're also using new sensors. Some survivors noticed faint red beams, narrower than before, sweeping the ground. If you see one, assume it's looking for you and get to cover. The stalkers are getting more aggressive too. A group in Oklahoma reported a pack of them chasing survivors across a field, not stopping even when the group split up. They're not just hunting. They're relentless, like they've got a goal. Those spider-like machines are the wild card. We're getting more sightings, especially near cities or old industrial areas. They're not just collecting anymore. Some survivors saw them assembling structures, small and angular, glowing faintly at night. Nobody knows what they're for, but they're guarded by stalkers, so they matter to the invaders. If you spot one, don't touch it. Watch, take notes, and move on. So, how do you keep going out there? First, stay sharp about your environment. If you're in a forest like Pine Hollow, use the trees. In a marsh like Bayview, use the water. In a city, use the clutter-wrecked cars, collapsed buildings. Know your ground and make it your advantage. Second, save your energy. You can't run or hide forever, so pace yourself. Eat small meals, rest when you can, and don't push past your limits unless you have to. A survivor in Georgia said she stayed alive by sleeping in short bursts, never more than an hour, to keep her mind clear. Third, hold onto something bigger. Then survival. It could be a person you love, a place you want to see again, or just the idea of a better day. That's what keeps you human when the world feels alien. If you're with others, share those reasons. It builds trust, like Marla's. Group singing in the pines or Calvin's folk swapping stories in the marshes. If you're alone, write it down, even if it's just scratches in the dirt. It's a way to remember who you are. One last story for this part, because it's worth hearing. It's about a girl named Lila Moreno, a 16-year-old from what used to be Phoenix. Lila was at school when the invasion hit, and in the chaos, she ended up alone, hiding in a community center. Most would have stayed put, but Lila, who'd always loved fixing things, decided to move. She found a bike in the center's storage and started traveling at night, sticking to back roads to avoid drones. Lila's survival is about improvisation. She carries a small packwater, a knife, some granola bars, and scavenges as she goes, checking abandoned cars or gas stations. She's learned to spot drone patterns, noticing they sweep in predictable arcs, and times her rides to slip through the gaps. For shelter, she uses whatever's nearby: culverts, sheds, even a storm drain once. She's also started leaving supplies for others, like Imran's medical kits, cans of food or bottles of water, hidden under rocks with a painted L to mark them. Her closest call was with a stalker. She was biking through a dry wash when she saw it, tall and silent, watching from a ridge. Lila dropped her bike and dove into a thicket, holding her breath as the stalker moved closer. She stayed still for hours, until it finally left. When she checked, she found her bike's wheel bent, but she fixed it with a wrench from her pack and kept going. Lila's still out there, pedaling through the desert, a quiet force leaving hope in her wake. Lila's story is about momentum. She didn't let fear stop her, didn't let one bad moment break her. It's a reminder that survival is a series of choices, each one a chance to keep moving forward. No matter how small the step, I want to start with a story from a place called Thornfield, a small town in what used to be Western Virginia, nestled in a valley between rolling hills. Thornfield's the kind of place where the air smells of grass and wood smoke. But when the invasion came, those hills became both a refuge and a challenge. The town's 250 residents turned to a woman named Esther Cole, a botanist who'd spent years studying the local plants, to lead them through. Her story is about using knowledge to carve out a life in the shadows. When the ships lit up the sky, Esther was at home, surrounded by her books and samples. She saw the drones sweep over the valley and knew staying in town was no good. The open streets were too exposed. She gathered the townsfolk at the old Grange Hall and proposed moving into the hills where caves and thickets could hide them. Most agreed, trusting her quiet confidence, and they set out, carrying food, clothes, and tools into the wilderness. Esther led them to a network of limestone caves, shallow but sheltered, with narrow entrances the drones couldn't easily scan. She showed them how to cover the openings with vines and moss, blending them into the hillside. A man named Greg Harlan, a former firefighter, organized the group, setting up camp with sleeping areas and a small cooking pit, vented through a crack in the rock to hide the smoke. A young woman, Mia Torres, who'd worked at the town's hardware store, scavenged supplies from abandoned homes, bringing back blankets and batteries. Food was tight, but Esther's knowledge made the difference. She taught them to gather wild plants, ramps, sorrel, and blackberries carefully to avoid anything toxic. She also showed them how to dry the plants, stretching their supplies. Greg rigged snares for small game, like rabbits, while Mia found a spring nearby, its water clean enough to drink after boiling. They lived lean, but they lived. The stalkers were the real danger. They'd been seen in the valley, moving at twilight, their long forms slipping through the trees. Esther noticed they avoided dense undergrowth, so she kept the group to thickly wooded paths, teaching them to move slowly, leaving no trace. They used mud to mask their scent, rubbing it on their clothes like Esther had read animals do. It felt strange, but it worked. Their biggest scare came one evening when Mia, out gathering wood, spotted a stalker just 100 yards away. Its head turned, scanning, and she froze, heart pounding. She signaled the caves with a whistle 2 short bursts, their code for danger. Esther cleared the main cave, moving everyone to a deeper chamber, its entrance hidden behind a rock slab. Greg doused the fire, and they waited, silent, as the stalker's steps crunched outside. It lingered, its shadow flickering across the cave mouth, then moved on. When Greg checked at dawn, he found only a few bent branches where it had passed Esther. Didn't let the close call break them. She sat everyone down, talked through what they'd learned. The stalker hadn't smelled them, thanks to the mud, and it hadn't seen the cave, thanks to the vines. They doubled their camouflage, adding more brush, and started rotating lookouts, with Mia training others to spot trouble early. Thornfield still holding on, hidden in those caves, a testament to Esther's quiet wisdom and the town's grit. Their story shows that knowledge about plants, about the land, can be as strong as any weapon. Let's move to a different place, a city called Riverton, once part of central Illinois. Rivertown was a hub of factories and rail yards, now a maze of rubble and twisted metal. When the invasion hit, most fled or hid, but a group of survivors stayed, led by a man named Darius Webb, a trained conductor who knew the city's underbelly. Their story is about using the ruins to stay one step ahead. Darius was in the rail yard when the ships appeared, their hum shaking the tracks. He rounded up about 40 people, co-workers, strangers, a few kids, and took them to an old freight tunnel, part of the city's forgotten rail system. The tunnel was damp and dark, but it was deep, safe from drones. Darius knew the network, miles of passages under Riverton, and saw it as their best shot. They moved in hauling food and lanterns, and set up a base. Life underground was grim. The air was stale, and the walls echoed every sound. Darius kept them organized, assigning tasks. A woman named Keisha Grant, a paramedic, handled injuries, using a first aid kit from the yard's office. A teenager, Noah Lee, scouted the tunnels, mapping safe exits. And a retired welder, Vernon Hayes, reinforced weak spots with scrap metal. They scavenged at night, hitting nearby warehouses for canned goods and water, always careful to avoid the drone's grids. The spider-like machines were their biggest threat. They'd started appearing in Riverton, crawling through the ruins, collecting wires and steel. Darius noticed they moved in swarms like ants and seemed drawn to active machinery. He rigged a decoy, a broken radio, set to hum faintly in a dead-end tunnel, luring the spiders away from their base. It worked, but it meant they had to stay quiet, avoiding anything that might draw attention. One night, Noah came back from scouting, pale and breathless. He'd seen something new, a structure built by the spiders, glowing faintly in a rail yard. It was small, sharp-edged, and guarded by a stalker. Darius didn't risk investigating. He moved the group to a new tunnel, farther out, and covered their tracks with debris. Keisha kept everyone calm, tending to a kid who'd scraped his leg, while Vernon blocked the old entrance with a steel plate. They lost some supplies, but they stayed hidden. Riverton's story is about agility. Darius didn't try to hold ground or fight back. He kept his people moving, using the tunnels to slip through the city's cracks. It's a lesson for anyone. In a city, know your paths, stay light, and don't get pinned down. The ruins are your map. If you learn to read them, Now, let's talk about the invaders, because the more we know, the better we can survive. The ships are still the core of their plan, but we're seeing new patterns. Survivors in the south report strange lights pulsing from the ships at night, not just signals but patterns like code. Some think it's communication, maybe with other ships or something beyond our sky. If you're near one, avoid open ground. The lights might be scanning too. The drones are getting smarter. Reports from the northwest say they're using new tactics, like hovering in place to listen for movement. They're also less predictable, breaking their usual grids to chase faint sounds. If you're moving, stop often, listen, and assume they're closer than you think. The stalkers are spreading out, hitting smaller towns now, not just cities. A survivor in Iowa said a pack of them tore through a farm, not attacking but searching, like they were looking for something specific. Keep your hiding spots tight, and don't leave anything valuable out. The spider-like machines are the puzzle. We're hearing they're not just building structures, they're changing the ground. Survivors near the metallic growths say the soil's turning hard, like concrete, and plants won't grow. Some saw spiders injecting something into the earth, leaving patches that glow faintly. If you find one of these spots, mark it and move on. Don't touch it. We don't know what it does. So, how do you keep going out there? First, stay invisible. Drones and stalkers rely on sight and sound, so break up your outline, wear dark clothes, cover shiny objects, and move in shadows. If you're in a group, like Esther's, spread out to avoid looking like a target. Second, ration your strength. Hunger and exhaustion make you sloppy, so eat small amounts often, even if it's just a handful of berries. Sleep in shifts if you can, to stay alert. Third, build a mental anchor. Fear's heavy, and it'll drag you down if you let it. Find something to hold onto, a song, a memory, a promise. Esther's group in Thornfield told stories in the caves. Darius's folks in Riverton shared jokes in the tunnels. If you're alone, talk to yourself, out loud or in your head. It's not crazy, it's survival. And share what you learn. If you spot a new drone pattern or a safe spring, leave a sign, like Leela's painted L. Every bit helps someone else. One last story for this part, because it's a strong one. It's about a man named Theo Ramsey, a mechanic from what used to be rural Arkansas. Theo was fixing a tractor when the invasion hit, and his small town emptied out fast. He stayed, not out of bravery, but because he had nowhere else to go. Alone, he turned his garage into a hideout, boarding up windows and hiding his tools under tarps. Theo's survival is about staying small. He lives off what's around: canned food from a nearby store, water from a rain barrel he rigged behind. The garage. He's learned the drone's routes, noticing they stick to main roads, so he moves through fields or ditches, always at night. For defense, he's built traps, tripwires tied to cans, set to rattle if anything gets close. They've saved him twice, warning him when stalkers passed nearby. His closest call was with one of those spider machines. It crawled into his yard, scanning, its legs clicking on the gravel. Theo hid under his workbench, barely breathing, as it probed the garage. It took a wrench, then left, its glow fading into the dark. Theo didn't chase it, he reinforced his hideout, adding more boards and a false wall. He's also started leaving supplies for others, like Leela and Imran, tools or batteries, tucked in old mailboxes with a carved T to mark them. Theo's story is about persistence. He's alone, but he's not broken. He keeps his garage, his traps, his small life, because it's his. It's a reminder that survival isn't always about running or fighting, it's about holding your ground, even if it's just a patch of dirt you call home. As we close this broadcast, I want to leave you with something. It's been weeks since the invasion started, and the world's not what it was. The ships are still up there, the drones still hum, the stalkers still hunt. But so are we. Every story we've shared: Cedar Hollow's stand, Iron Bend's decoys, Willow Creek's tunnels, Sagebrush's canyons, Fairview's silence, Pine Hollow's pines, Bayview's marshes, Thornfield's caves, Riverton's tunnels, Leela's bike, Theo's garage is proof of that. We're still here, still finding ways to live, to hope, to fight. You're part of that, listener. Wherever you are, huddled in a basement, crouched in a forest, or moving through a ruined city, you're writing your story. It's not about being fearless or strong. It's about choosing to keep going, one step at a time. Maybe you're alone, like Theo, or with others, like Esther's group. Maybe you're leaving signs for others, like Leela's owl or Theo's tea. Whatever you're doing, it matters. So, what's next? Keep listening, because the midnight signal's not going quiet. We'll keep sharing stories, tips, whatever we learn about the invaders. If you've got a story, a trick, or just a word to share, find a way to send it. Scratch it on a wall, whisper it to a traveler, or, if you're lucky, get it to a radio. We're stronger when we talk, when we listen. For now, take a breath. Think about what you're fighting for: a person, a place, or just the chance to see tomorrow. Hold it close, because that's your fire. The invaders can take a lot, but they can't take that. Wherever you are, keep your eyes open, your heart steady, and your radio on. This is Richard Radio, signing off for now, but not for good. The air's got that quiet hum tonight, like the world's waiting for what comes next, picking up where we left off, sharing the stories that keep us tethered to each other. This is our final broadcast for now, so let's make it count. More tales of survival, more lessons from the folks out there fighting to hold on. Let's finish this together. I want to start with a story from a place called Driftwood, a coastal hamlet in what used to be southern Oregon. Driftwood's a rugged spot, with cliffs dropping into the Pacific and driftwood piled high on the beaches. When the invasion hit, the town's 180 residents were stranded, cut off by wrecked roads and drone patrols. Their story is about the seas protection led by a woman named Clara Vance, a marine biologist who'd studied the coast her whole life. Clara was on the beach, collecting samples when the ships cast their shadows over the waves. She ran to Driftwood's community center, where people were already panicking. Clara calmed them, her voice steady, and said the cliffs and tide pools could hide them better than any building. She convinced most to follow her, and they moved to a series of sea caves along the shore, accessible only at low tide. They carried food, blankets, and fishing gear. Setting up camp in the damp, echoing caves, Clara knew the tides like a book, so she timed their movements to avoid drone sweeps, which stuck to the cliff's edges. A man named Otis Bell, a retired fisherman, helped build shelters, weaving driftwood and kelp into low roofs that blended with the rocks. A young woman, Harper Quinn, who'd worked at the local cafe, organized meals, cooking fish and seaweed over small fires shielded by the cave walls. Kids pitched in, gathering mussels and crabs, learning the rhythm of the tides alongside Clara. The stalkers were their biggest threat, prowling the cliffs at dusk, their long limbs scraping the stone. Clara noticed they avoided water, so she kept the group close to the shore, using shallow pools to mask their scent. They moved camp every few days, following the caves along the coast, leaving no trace. Otis rigged decoys, piles of driftwood set to collapse with a tug of a rope to distract drones, giving them time to slip away. Their toughest moment came one stormy night. Harper was out checking a fishing net when she saw a group of spider-like machines crawling down the cliff, their legs glinting in the rain. She signaled Clara, who moved everyone to the deepest cave, its entrance half submerged. Otis pulled the decoy ropes, sending driftwood crashing far from their hiding spot, while Clara covered the cave mouth with wet kelp. The machines scuttled past, scanning, but the storm's roar and the sea's spray confused them. By morning, they were gone, leaving only a few metal shards caught in the rocks. Clara kept the group focused after that, teaching them to read the weather for cover and to use the cave's natural echoes to detect movement. Driftwood's still out there, living by the tides, a testament to Clara's knowledge and their shared resolve. Their story shows that even the wildest place is the sea. The cliffs can be home if you learn their ways. Let's shift to a different scene. A rural stretch called Cottonwood Flats in what used to be northern Texas. Cottonwood Flats is open country, with cotton fields and scattered barns, now silent under the invaders' watch. The 150 or so folks there found a way to survive, led by a man named Roy Delgado, a veterinarian who knew how to keep things alive. Their story is about staying low and building quiet alliances. Roy was in his clinic when the ships arrived, their hum startling the animals. He saw the drones sweep the fields and knew the open land was a death trap. He gathered the locals at his barn, a sturdy building half hidden by cottonwoods, and proposed a plan: live small, spread out, and connect with nearby farms. They split into small groups, each taking a barn or shed linked by runners who moved. At night, Roy's barn became the hub, where they stored food and planned. They lived lean, using the land's cover. A woman named Alma Ruiz, a school bus driver, organized runners, teaching them to use ditches and hedgerows to avoid drones. A farmer, Calvin Morse, shared his crops: potatoes, beans, rationing them carefully and planting new seeds in hidden patches. A teenager, Jalen Carter, rigged solar panels from a wrecked truck to charge batteries, giving them light and a radio to hear distant signals. The spider-like machines started appearing, collecting metal from old tractors and fences. Roy noticed they followed straight lines, like roads or field edges, so he had the group break up their paths, scattering rocks and brush to confuse the machines. They also used the animals' dogs and goats to warn of stalkers, their barks or bleats carrying across the flats. It wasn't perfect, but it gave them seconds to hide. One night, Jalen spotted a stalker near Roy's barn, its silhouette sharp against the moon. He signaled Alma, who cleared the barn, moving everyone to a nearby ditch. Roy stayed behind, releasing a goat to run the opposite way, its hooves loud on the dirt. The stalker followed the goat, giving the group time to scatter to other barns. When Calvin checked at dawn, the stalker was gone, leaving only deep tracks in the soil. Roy regrouped everyone, reinforcing their network with new signals and hiding spots. Cottonwood Flats is still out there, a web of small refuges tied together by trust. What Cottonwood Flats shows is the power of connection. Roy didn't try to hold one spot or fight alone. He built a network, each barn a node in a bigger plan. It's a lesson for us. Find others, even if it's just a handful, and share the load. Together, you're harder to break. Now, let's talk about the invaders one last time, because understanding them is how we stay ahead. The ships are still up there, their pulses stronger now, like they're gearing up for something. Survivors in the Midwest say the metallic growths near the ships are spreading faster, choking rivers and fields. Some saw drones guarding them, not just patrolling like they're protecting something vital. If you're near these growths, don't linger, find a new path. The drones are tougher now, moving in unpredictable sweeps, sometimes doubling back to catch runners off guard. A survivor in California said they're using sound traps emitting faint clicks to lure people out. If you hear something odd, don't follow it. It's not human. The stalkers are bolder too, hitting groups in tight spaces, like forests or alleys. They're not just hunting, they're testing, pushing to see how we react. Stay unpredictable, change your patterns, and never assume you're safe. The spider-like machines are the key to their plan, or so it seems. Reports from the East Coast say they're building networks, grids of glowing nodes, linked by thin, metallic threads. A survivor in Virginia saw stalkers guarding one like it was a command post. Nobody's cracked what they're for, but they're not random. If you find one, mark its location, maybe with a rock pile, and tell someone. That knowledge could be the difference. So, how do you keep fighting? First, stay adaptable. The invaders are learning, so you have to too. If you're in a cave like Thornfield, add new hiding spots. If you're moving like Riverton, vary your routes. Second, guard your resources. Water's gold, store it in anything clean, like bottles or buckets, and purify it with heat or cloth filters. Food's trickier, but even scraps, nuts, roots, or small game can keep you going. Share what you can't carry, like Clara's group did with extra fish. Third, hold on to hope, not as a wish, but as a choice. Every story we've told Clara's. Caves, Roy's barns, Esther's hills, Darius's tunnels, Leela's bike, Theo's garage is a choice to keep going. Find yours. It might be a kid you're protecting, a friend you're finding, or just the stubborn need to see what's next. Write it in your mind like a note you'll never lose, and let it carry you one final story because it ties us together. It's about a woman named Nora Callowell, a seamstress from what used to be Memphis. Nora was in her shop when the invasion hit, stitching a dress for a wedding that never happened. As the city crumbled, she gathered a dozen people, neighbors, customers, a delivery boy named Sam, and turned her shop into a hideout. Its back room shielded by racks of fabric. Nora's survival was about community. She used her skills to make camouflage sewing tarps and old clothes into covers that blended with the rubble. Sam scouted, quick on his feet, bringing back food from nearby stores. A man named Eli Watts, a janitor, rigged a water trap, funneling rain through a broken pipe into jugs. They lived quietly, sharing stories of the city before, keeping their spirits up with Nora's calm voice. Their closest call was a drone that lingered outside, its red beam sweeping the shop. Nora moved everyone behind a wall of fabric, pinning it tight to block their heat. Sam tossed a bottle cap out the back, clattering it against a dumpster, and the drone followed the sound. They held their breath until it left, then reinforced the shop with more boards and cloth. Nora started leaving patches, scraps of fabric with a stitched N on safe paths, guiding others to water or shelter. Nora's group is still there, a small light in Memphis's dark. Her story is about weaving people together, using what you have to protect what matters. It's the heart of everything we've shared. Survival isn't just living, it's living for each other. As we end this journey, let me say this. The invasion changed everything, but it didn't change us. From Cedar Hollow to Driftwood, from lone riders like Leela to groups like Nora's, we're still human, still fighting, still hoping. The ships, the drones, the stalkers, they're strong, but they don't know what we do, that every day we choose to stand, to help, to share, is a victory they can't touch. You're part of this, listener. Your story, whether it's hiding, in a ditch, feeding a stranger, or just listening to this signal is what keeps us going. The midnight signal's going quiet for now, but it's not gone. We'll be back with more voices, more ways to fight. If you've got something to say, leave it a mark, a whisper, a signal. We'll find it. Take a moment. Think about what's kept you here, the people, the places, the small wins. Hold them tight, because they're your strength. The night's long, but it's not forever. Wherever you are, keep your fire burning, your steps sure, and your radio ready. This is Richard. Radio signing off, but not goodbye.